Korean Mafia boss didn't hang up after call with assistant. The gun was already on the table when she walked in. Zara didn't scream. She had learned in the 14 months she had worked for Kang Jae-won. That screaming was the one thing you must never do in a room where a gun was present and the man holding the conversation looked like he had already decided how it ended. So instead she stopped. 3 steps inside the door, portfolio in hand, coffee going cold at her side, eyes on the weapon, then on the 2 men sitting across from her employer, then on Kang Jae-won himself, who was watching her with an expression that said, "Do not move, do not speak, and do not look afraid." She did all 3. The meeting ended 11 minutes later. She never found out what was said in the language. She didn't speak. She only knew that when the 2 men left, their demeanor had shifted from something threatening to something that looked uncomfortably like submission. And that Jae-won had not moved once, had not raised his voice once, had simply sat and spoken and let the silence between his sentences do the work that other men needed weapons for. When the door closed, he looked at her. "You didn't run," he said. "You told me not to move," she said. Something crossed his face, too fast to name. The Taegu report. Leave it on the desk. She left it on the desk. She walked out, and she stood in the corridor for 45 seconds with her back against the wall and her eyes on the ceiling, breathing. That was 14 months ago. This is now. And if she thought that was the most dangerous moment this job would ever produce, she had no idea what was coming. If you are new here, welcome to Heartthread Tales. Hit that subscribe button right now and stay with us, because this story is going to take you somewhere you are not ready for. If you have been here from the start, drop a comment below and tell me, would you have run or would you have stayed? And hit that like button right now, because this story is only getting started. The morning it all truly began was a Thursday. Zara arrived at 6:45 because she always arrived at 6:45 before the building filled, before the phone started, before the particular controlled chaos of Kang Jae-won's empire began its daily rotation. She liked those 15 minutes, the quiet of the 42nd floor before anyone else reached it. The city is still dark outside the windows, the lights of Seoul scattered below like something spilled and beautiful, and just her and her coffee and the clean architecture of a day not yet interrupted. She was at her desk, scheduled to open, when she heard his door. He was already there. He was always already there. She had stopped being surprised by it around month 3, when she understood that Kang Jae-won did not sleep the way normal men slept, not because he was inhuman, but because his mind did not grant him the luxury of full stillness. It was always working, always 3 moves ahead, always finding the thread in a situation that everyone else had missed. "Zara." His voice through the intercom was the same at 6:45 as it was at midnight, even, unhurried, the kind of voice that had learned long ago that volume was for people who hadn't yet established authority. "Good morning," she answered. "The Singapore call is at 7:15. I've prepared the revised contract language you asked for, the compliance summary from Seoul, and the bridge financing overview from Busan, all attached in the briefing folder." A pause. "Come in," he said. She gathered the physical copies he always wanted, a habit she found old-fashioned, and had stopped questioning and pushed through the heavy door. He was standing at the window, not sitting, standing with his hands loose at his sides, looking out at the city the way he sometimes did in these early hours, like he was taking inventory of it. The dark shirt, the sleeves have not yet rolled, the tattoo visible above his collar, curling up the side of his neck with an elegance that had absolutely no business existing on a man who ran the kind of operations he ran. She set the documents on his desk without being asked. "The Taegu situation," he said, still at the window. "Did you flag the discrepancy in the land registry?" Page 4 of the compliance summary. Red tab. "The Incheon revised terms. Did Park's team confirm?" "Confirmed at 11 last night. I replied at 11:03. The Seoul Bridge has a clause on page 9 that contradicts the verbal agreement from the February call. I've highlighted it and drafted 3 alternative wordings. They're on page 11. He turned from the window then, looked at her across the room with those dark, sharp eyes, the eyes that processed everything quickly and revealed nothing unnecessarily. You found that last night, he said. It was not a question. I found it at 9:40. I was going to flag it this morning, but since you're asking now, why didn't you call me? She met his gaze. Because it's a contract discrepancy, not a crisis. You were in the Gangnam meeting until midnight. You needed those hours more than you needed me in your ear about a clause. Another silence, the specific kind he deployed when something had surprised him and he was deciding how to file it. Good, he said. And then he sat down and opened the briefing folder, and the morning began. This was how it always was. This was the rhythm she had built for herself inside his orbit. Precise, professional, anticipatory. She knew his patterns the way you know the tide when you have lived by the water long enough. She knew which silences were thinking and which were displeasure. She knew that he took his coffee without anything at all, and that the brand she ordered was the only one he never complained about. She knew that when he pressed 2 fingers to the corner of his mouth, he was running numbers in his head. She knew that when he removed his jacket in a meeting, it meant he intended to stay until the problem was solved, regardless of how long that took. She knew him the way you know someone when you have paid close, careful, professional attention to them for 14 months. She told herself it was professionalism. She was lying and she knew it, and she had decided that knowing it and managing it quietly was considerably better than the alternative. The alternative being telling the truth. The conference call was at 3 in the afternoon. 7 executives. For time zones. 1 agenda item that had somehow generated 40 pages of conflicting documentation and 2 hours of preparation on Zara's part just to ensure the briefing materials were coherent. She had been on calls like this before, the kind where J1's name on the dial-in was enough to make men in 3 countries sit up straighter before he said a word. This one was no different. She sat at her desk, headset on, fingers moving across her keyboard to pull documents at his request, muting and unmuting lines with the quiet efficiency of someone who had done this so many times it had become reflex. He spoke from his office, his voice traveling through the line like something composed, measured, precise, with that particular quality of stillness that made you understand this man had never needed to compete for a room's attention in his life. The room simply gave it to him. Page 14, he said at one point. The liability clause. Zara had it on screen before the sentence finished. Zara, he said, read the 2nd paragraph. She read it. Clean, even, no hesitation. She had read it 3 times in preparation, specifically, so she could do exactly this without stumbling. Thank you, he said. She had learned not to react to that. She had learned it at around month 2 when she realized that his thank you was not like other people's thank you. It wasn't reflexive or polite or empty. He said it only when he meant it, which meant each time it carried actual weight, which meant each time it landed somewhere in her chest that she had very firmly tried to brick up and insulate. The call ran 47 minutes. When it ended, the automated voice said, "All participants have disconnected." Zara pulled off her headset, leaned back, pressed her palms flat against her desk, and exhaled the particular brand of exhaustion that came not from doing something hard, but from doing something hard while simultaneously managing everything she felt about the man directing it. She picked up her phone, opened her contacts, hit the name at the top. Amara picked up on the 2nd ring. "Tell me everything," her best friend said immediately, the way she always did, like she had been sitting there waiting with her chin in her hands. "I am not okay," Zara said. She got up, walked to her window, pressed her forehead to the glass. Seoul, 42 floors below, indifferent and glittering. He said my name approximately 11 times in 47 minutes, and I counted every single one, and that should tell you everything you need to know about the state of my mental health. Amara made a sound that was equal parts sympathy and delight. 11 times. 11. Zara closed her eyes. "And he has this thing he does, this pause before he says it, like your name is a decision he's making rather than just a word. Like he's chosen it, and I know that it is professional. I know he is simply directing his assistant on a business call. But Amara, I am telling you, my nervous system does not know the difference. You need to quit." "I cannot quit." He would know why, and that would be worse than staying. "Then confess." "Absolutely not. Have you lost your mind?" This man walked into a room with two men carrying weapons last year, and they left looking like they'd been scolded by a principal. He does not have feelings the way regular people have feelings. He has assessments. He would assess mine and file them somewhere, and I would have to watch him file them, and I would never recover. You don't know that. I know enough. Zara turned from the window, dropped onto the small sofa in the corner of her office. He's Afro-Korean, Amara. The combination should be illegal. The curls, the bone structure, that jaw, and the tattoo, it starts at his neck, and you can see it when he turns his head, and it is the most elegant thing I have ever seen on a person, and that is completely unfair because this is a man who runs operations that I am fairly certain do not appear in any government registry. Describe the tattoo again. No, I need you to be serious with me. I am serious. I'm seriously asking. He is going to destroy me, Amara. Not intentionally, not cruelly, just by existing in proximity to me while being exactly who he is. And the worst part is that I cannot get out of my head because he doesn't even see me. Not really. I am efficient. I am organized. I anticipate his needs, and I manage his world, and he appreciates the way you appreciate excellent infrastructure. Reliable, functional, invisible. I am furniture to this man. Beautiful furniture that does its job very well, and he never once. She stopped, because she heard it, a breath, faint, so faint that for one suspended second she thought she had imagined it. She hadn't imagined it. The conference line, the line that the automated voice had said was clear, the line where all participants had disconnected. All participants. Not, the line is empty. Her eyes went to her headset on the desk, her laptop screen. The conference call interface is still open, the timer still running. One small indicator light still green. One participant still connected. The cold that moved through her body started at the base of her spine and moved upward like water through cracks in stone. Slow, thorough, inevitable. She did not move. She did not breathe. She sat on her small sofa with her phone pressed to her ear and Amara still talking on the other end, and she stared at that green light and did the math, and the math was catastrophic. Amara, she said. Her voice was perfectly steady. She had no idea how. I'll call you back. She ended the call, sat in complete silence. Then, very carefully, she reached over and ended the conference line. The green light went dark. She sat for a long time after that, staring at nothing, while the city moved below her and the building breathed around her, and somewhere on this same floor, in an office with heavy doors and floor-to-ceiling windows, Kang Jae-won sat with everything she had just said. He had not moved since the call ended. The city outside his window had done its usual thing, indifferent, continuous, lit against the darkening afternoon sky. He had not looked at it. He had been looking at nothing in particular, which was where he looked when he was processing something that required more than analysis. Because this was not an analysis problem. He had heard everything. The 11 times. The pause before her name and what it did to her. The tattoo. The part about the two men with weapons last year that she had stayed with. That she had stood there with her portfolio and her cold coffee and not made a sound. Not because she wasn't afraid, but because he had asked her not to. He had not known she remembered that. He had not known she had been frightened. She had never shown it. The part about the furniture. He pressed 2 fingers to the corner of his mouth. Sat with that word. Furniture. He had spent 14 months telling himself that the particular attention he paid to Zara Michaels was professional. That noting the exact moment her posture shifted was an observational habit. That knowing her coffee order and the cafe she preferred and the way she always paused for half a second before delivering bad news because she was finding the most precise way to say it, that all of this was simply intelligence gathering, the kind he applied to everything. He had been doing what she had been doing, lying to himself, managing it, quietly. He reached for his phone, called his head of security. Tomorrow evening, he said, clear the floor by 6:30. Everyone goes home. Everyone, sir? Everyone, he said, except Ms. Michaels. He set the phone down. I looked at the city. Furniture. She had called herself. He was going to correct that. The next morning Zara arrived at 6:45 and sat at her desk and opened her schedule and stared at it without reading a single word for 4 full minutes. Then she straightened her spine, smoothed her hands over her desk, and decided that she was a professional. This was a professional environment, and she was going to behave with the same composure she always brought to situations that were attempting to undo her. She was going to pretend it never happened. This plan lasted until the coffee appeared. 9:45, the specific roast, the specific cafe, left at her elbow by a junior staff member who was already walking away. She had mentioned that cafe to no one in this building. She was certain. She stared at the cup, filed it, drank it. At 10:15, a briefing appeared on her calendar, pre-populated. Every document she would have needed already attached, every figure already pulled. Someone had done her preparation before she'd known to do it. She sat still for a long time. At noon, she brought documents to his office. She set them down, said what she always said, and he looked up, not past her, not through her. He looked at her face, at the small gold earrings at her hands, with a completeness of attention that stopped her breath without his saying a single word. "Thank you," Zari said. She walked out, stood in the corridor with her hand on the door handle, heart loud. By 3 o'clock, she had convinced herself she was imagining it. By 5, she had unconvinced herself twice. And at 5:47, when his voice came through the intercom, "Zara, my office." She stopped trying to manage anything at all. She sat across from him, portfolio in her lap, expression held together by sheer professional muscle memory. He sat across from her, jacket off, sleeves up, tattoo visible. She did not look at it. He let the silence breathe the way he always did. Not cruelly, but with the patience of someone who had never needed to rush anything. "Yesterday," he said, "after the call." The world tilted. She kept her voice absolutely level. The automated message indicated all participants had disconnected. It did. But you hadn't. No. One word. Then silence. She held herself with both hands on the inside. On the outside, she was still, professional, composed. "How much did you hear?" she asked. He looked at her with those dark, precise eyes. "Enough." She closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. I opened them. "I would like to resign," she said. "No. Mr. Kong. No." He leaned forward. One small movement. The room changed. "You said you were furniture." Her jaw tightened. "I want to address that," he said. And then he told her. Quietly, without performance, without the softening other men would have applied, he told her that he noticed the scheduling format she changed in September, that he knew she took the stairs, that he had noticed the earrings, the half-second pause before bad news, the way she stood when she was tired and making it look like she wasn't, that he had been paying the specific and deliberate attention of a man who was trying very hard to convince himself it was professional. "I was doing," he said, "exactly what you were doing." She stared at him. "I don't do this," he said. "I want to be honest with you because you deserve honesty and because I do not say things I don't mean. I have never sat across from anyone in this office and said what I am saying to you. But you decided something that affected both of us without asking me, and I don't allow decisions about my life to be made without my input." Something cracked open in her chest, quiet and irreversible. "I'd like to take you to dinner," he said. Clean, direct, no softening. Not as your employer, as the man who listened to you for 8 minutes and has not stopped thinking about it since. She laughed helplessly and real and pressed her fingers to her mouth. "J1, she said, the name crossing the professional line they had held for 14 months. His eyes held hers. "Yes," she said, "to dinner." The smile that crossed his face was nothing like the boardroom. It was quiet and careful and young in a way that told her it had been put away for a long time. He extended his hand. She put hers in it. "One condition," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "Stop calling me Mr. Kong." She looked at him, impossible and infuriating and worth every bit of the 14 months. "J1, she said again. His grip tightened. "Exactly like that. Before we go further, drop a comment right now. What would you have done if you were Zara? Tell me below. And if you are watching this without having subscribed yet, this is your sign. Hit that button. Because what's coming next? You cannot miss it. 3 weeks. 3 weeks of dinners in restaurants that did not advertise their existence. 3 weeks of him asking what she actually thought, not what the schedule said, not what the documents showed, but what she, Zara, believed. 3 weeks of discovering that the man behind the controlled exterior was precise and dark-humored and occasionally, unexpectedly, gentle in the specific way that careful people are gentle, not soft but intentional. Like gentleness was a decision he made rather than a reflex he had. She discovered he read obsessively about history, economics, the occasional novel he would never admit to. She discovered he had a younger sister in Busan who called him every Sunday and was the only person on earth who could make him pick up before the third ring. She discovered that his Afro-Korean heritage, a Korean mother, a Ghanaian father who had left before he was old enough to have a clear memory of him, was something he carried quietly, like a room in himself he had furnished carefully and did not show to most people. She showed him things too. Her family in Lagos, the ones who called on a schedule she had color-coded in her personal calendar. Her obsession with architecture, the way she could look at a building and explain exactly why it worked or didn't in the same precise language she used for contracts. Her fear, which she told him directly and without softening, that his world had edges she couldn't see, and that invisible edges were the ones that cut. He had looked at her across the table when she said that, in the particular focused way that meant he was filing something permanently rather than temporarily. "I know," he said. "That's not comforting." "It wasn't meant to be," he said. "It was meant to be honest." She had decided, somewhere in the second week, that his honesty was the most dangerous thing about him. More dangerous than the operations she only partially understood. More dangerous than the men who went quiet when he entered rooms. Because his honesty had no armor around it, no cushioning, no performance. He simply said what was true and expected you to do the same. And there was something in that expectation that made you want to rise to it even when it cost you something. She was falling. She knew it the way you know weather is changing. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in the accumulating evidence of 1,000 small things that eventually become undeniable. She was falling, and she had decided to let herself. And then Park Seo-jin walked through the lobby of the KJW Tower on a Tuesday morning, and everything that had been building quietly shattered into something much more complicated. Zara was at her desk when the call came from the lobby, and Ms. Park Seo-jin, the front desk attendant, said carefully, with the tone people used when they were uncertain whether they were about to cause trouble. "She says she has a standing arrangement. She didn't make an appointment." Zara kept her voice neutral. "I'll be right down." She took the elevator. Standing arrangement. Not scheduled. No appointment. The phrasing of someone who had not needed one before. Park Seo-jin was exactly what her name on the lobby visitor log suggested. Composed, elegant, dressed with the deliberate precision of someone who had been raised to understand that appearance was its own language. She was Korean, perhaps 30, with a kind of quiet certainty in her bearing that came from a specific kind of upbringing. Old money, old connections. She looked at Zara with an expression that was perfectly pleasant and absolutely unreadable. "I'm here to see J1, she said. The name without a title. The name with a familiarity that landed in Zara's chest like something thrown. "Mr. Kang's schedule is full this morning," Zara said. Pleasantly, professionally. "If you'd like to make an appointment, tell him Seo-jin is here," the woman said. Still pleasant, still unreadable. "He'll make time." Zara went upstairs. I stood outside his office. Knocked once. "Come." She pushed the door open. "A Park Seo-jin is in the lobby. She didn't have an appointment. She said to tell you she was here and you'd make time." Something crossed his face, briefly and controlled, and entirely impossible for her to interpret in that single second. "Send her up," he said. Zara nodded, closed the door, walked back to her desk with her shoulders straight and her expression neutral, and her mind doing something loud and unwelcome that she refused to put a name to. She sent Park Seo-jin up. She did not ask questions. She did not look at the closed office door. She opened the Incheon file and worked with the focused precision of someone who had decided that feelings were something to be managed, and she was very good at managing things. She was still working 40 minutes later when the office door opened and Park Seo-jin came out alone. She stopped at Zara's desk. "You're very good at this," she said quietly, nodding at the organized desk, the efficient layout of a perfectly managed empire. He said so. Zara looked up, kept her voice even. "Thank you." Park Seo-jin studied her for a moment with those unreadable eyes. Then she said, so quietly it was almost gentle, "Be careful. People who are close to him become targets. Not by his choice, but by the nature of what he is." A pause. "I say this not as a threat. I say it because I have known him since we were children, and I have watched what happens to the people he lets in." She left before Zara could respond. Jae-won's door opened 2 minutes later. "Zara," he said from the doorway. "Come in." She came in, sat in the chair across from him, portfolio in her lap, out of habit, even though this was not a briefing. "Seo-jin," he said without preamble, "I need to explain to her." "You don't." "I do." He sat across from her, leaned forward, elbows on the desk. "Our families have a long arrangement. I am 20 years old. Made when I was 15 and she was 13, and neither of us had any say in it. I have not honored it. I will not honor it. But it exists on paper, and her family considers it binding, and I have been for reasons that are complicated and involve people whose safety I am responsible for. I have been managing that situation quietly for 3 years." Zara looked at him. "She came today," he continued, "to tell me that her family has decided to make it public. An announcement. They've been patient and they have run out of patience, and they intend to announce it in 2 weeks, whether I participate or not." The silence in the room had weight. "What does that mean for you?" she asked. "It means," he said, "that I have 2 weeks to dismantle 20 years of a family agreement without starting a war. And it means," he stopped, looked at her with those direct, honest eyes. "It means I needed you to hear it from me. Not from a lobby interaction, and not from whoever talks." She sat with that, with the fact that he had pulled her in here, not to brief her, but to be honest with her. That his first instinct when something complicated arrived was to make sure she had the truth of it. "Okay," she said. "Okay." "I trust you to handle it," she said, "and I appreciate you telling me." He looked at her for a long moment. "You're not angry." "I'm not angry. I'm processing." She met his eyes. "Are you safe? Is this situation the kind that becomes dangerous?" The question hung in the air, and the way he didn't answer immediately told her more than words would have. "I am always navigating something," he said finally. "That is not new." "What is new?" He paused, and she watched him choose the words carefully. "Is that I now have a reason to navigate it faster." She held his gaze. "Then navigate it." He reached across the desk, put his hand over hers for a moment, brief, warm, certain. Then the phone rang and the Empire required him, and they were back to being what they always had to be in this building. And she walked out with her portfolio and closed the door and sat at her desk and breathed. She had 2 weeks. She didn't know yet that she didn't have 2 weeks. She had 4 days. It was a Thursday when Min-jun came to her desk. Min-jun was one of Jae-won's senior operations managers, a quiet man in his 40s, 7 years in the organization. The kind of fixture that gets overlooked because he is always simply there. He stopped at her desk at 11 in the morning with a question about a document she had filed the week before. A normal question, an unremarkable interaction. She found out later that while they were talking, he was photographing her screen. She found out later that the photographs went to a man named Cho Dae-hyun, who ran an organization from Incheon that had been in quiet competition with Jae-won's operations for 6 years, who had been watching and waiting and looking for the one thing that could be used. She found out all of this later. What she found on Thursday afternoon was a black car that was not her usual car service, and a driver she did not recognize, and the particular cold instinct she had developed in 14 months of working in proximity to dangerous men that told her, something is wrong. She did not get in the car. She went back inside, called the car service, confirmed her car was running 7 minutes late. She stood in the lobby, waited. I watched the black car idle. When her actual car arrived and she got in, she looked back at the lobby and saw, just at the edge of her vision, Minjun standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 42nd floor. Looking down, she called J1 before the car had turned the first corner. He picked up before the second ring. Zara. Something's wrong, she said. I don't know exactly what, but I need you to listen. He listened. She described the car. The driver she didn't recognize. Minjun at the window. She described it precisely, chronologically, the way she organized everything cleanly, no excess, every relevant detail in order. When she finished, there was a silence that was entirely different from his professional silences. This one was cold in a specific way that she recognized from 14 months of learning to read him. Where are you now? He said. In my car. On the way home. Change the destination, he said. I'm sending you an address. Go there. Don't stop anywhere. Don't get out until someone I send personally opens the door. J1. Zara. Her name and his voice had a quality she had never heard before. Not the controlled authority of the boardroom. Something raw underneath. Something that had dropped the distance it usually carried. Please. She went to the address. It was a residential building in a part of the city she didn't know. She waited in the car. A man she recognized from J1's security detail opened the door and took her upstairs to an apartment that was clean and spare and clearly maintained for exactly this kind of situation. She could see the professionalism of it, the thought that had gone into a space designed to keep someone safe without making them feel imprisoned. She sat on the couch. She thought about Park Seo-jin's words in the lobby. Be careful. People who are close to him become targets. She had heard it as a warning about heartbreak. She understood now it was a warning about something considerably more concrete. J1 arrived 2 hours later. She heard him before she saw him at the door. The exchange with the security detail in the hall. 3 words in Korean she had learned meant stand down. Then the door opened and he was there, still in the dark shirt, jacket now on, the tattoo at his neck, and his eyes went to her immediately, and something in his face that had been tightly controlled unlocked in a single second before he composed it again. Are you hurt? He said. No, I didn't get in the car. I know. He crossed the room. Sat in the chair across from her rather than beside her. She recognized the deliberateness of it, the care of not crowding her when she was already adjusting to a great deal. Minjun is no longer with the organization. The car has been tracked. I know who sent it. Cho Dae-hyun, she said. He looked at her. I pay attention, she said quietly. 14 months of your world. I've learned names. He was quiet for a moment. Cho wants leverage. He doesn't intend to harm you. He intended to bring you somewhere as a conversation opener. His version of sending a message. His voice was even. It was doing the evenness deliberately, she could tell. It will not happen again. How can you be sure? Because I am going to make it very clear, he said, that the cost of trying it again is something he cannot afford. She looked at him, at the controlled certainty of him, at the thing that was underneath it that she had only started to be able to see in the past 3 weeks, the part that felt. The part that was, right now, doing something it did not usually do in professional settings. You're scared, she said softly. His jaw tightened. I don't. Not for yourself, she said. For me. A silence. Yes, he said. 1 word. Quiet as paper. The most unguarded thing she had heard from him. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she stood up from the couch and crossed the small distance between them and sat beside him and put her hand in his. And he looked at their hands for a moment before he turned his palm and held hers back. And they sat like that in the spare, clean quiet of a room designed for emergencies. And she thought, this is also love. Not the dinner tables. Not the carefully chosen words. This moment, in a safe house in a part of the city she didn't know, holding hands with a man who had just admitted he was afraid for her. This was where it became real. The next 72 hours moved fast and slow in the way of all crises, stretched in some moments, compressed in others, with a quality of unreality that came from living inside something you couldn't have predicted 3 weeks ago. J1 worked. He worked the way she had always suspected he worked when the stakes were highest. Not frantically, not visibly, but with a focused, relentless efficiency that made her understand how empires were built and maintained by men like him. She watched it from a proximity she had never had before. The calls in low voices, the meetings she sat outside of, the people who arrived and departed with the particular deference of those who understood the hierarchy they were operating inside. She worked too. She was not going to be managed through this like a problem. She told him so on the first morning, clearly over coffee in the spare kitchen of the safe house. "I'm not going to sit here and wait," she said. "Give me something useful to do." He looked at her across the kitchen. "You want to work?" "I always work. That hasn't changed because someone tried to put me in an unauthorized car." Something almost like a smile. "The Incheon file," he said. "There's a discrepancy in the third-party audits that I haven't had time to send it." He sent it. She found the discrepancy in 40 minutes. She sent it back with 3 annotations and a suggested resolution. He read it, looked up at her from across the room. "Page 4, he said. "The subsidiary structure creates a liability loop. I've drafted an alternative language." He looked at her for a long moment. "Zara." "Yes." "When this is over," he said, "I'm giving you a raise." She laughed. It came out real and surprised, and it broke something in the tightness that had been living in her chest for 3 days. On the 3rd day, J1 called a meeting. She was not in it. She sat in the adjoining room and heard nothing clearly, only the texture of voices, J1's even and precise, others more variable. It lasted 40 minutes. When the men left, she watched them go through the window, 7 of them, with the bearing of people who had received information and intended to act on it. J1 came in. Minjun confirmed everything, he said. He sat across from her. He was operating under instruction from Cho for 8 months. The Park family arrangement, Cho learned about it through contacts and saw an opportunity. He believed that pressuring the arrangement would destabilize me. He paused. He also believed that you were a slight hardening of his jaw, a more significant vulnerability than I had let on. Was he wrong? She said. A silence. No, he said. She held his eyes. What happens now? Cho and I have reached an understanding, he said. The terms are not something I'll detail, but they are binding and they have been communicated in a language he understands thoroughly. And the Park family arrangement. I had a conversation with Seo Jin's father yesterday morning, he said. It was direct. The arrangement is dissolved. It will not be announced publicly. He met her gaze. Seo Jin agreed. She told me to tell you, he paused, and she saw something that might have been the ghost of wry acknowledgement in his face, that she has always found arranged marriages to be an antiquated institution, and she's been trying to find an exit that preserved everyone's dignity for 2 years. Zara stared at him. She's been trying to get out of it too? It appears so. Then why didn't the 2 of you just? Because her family is complicated and my leverage over her family is the kind that cannot be used gently, he said. It required a specific approach. That approach is now complete. She sat back, let out a breath that was several days old. It's over, she said. This particular version of it, he said. Something else will come. There is always something else. I know, she said. He looked at her. And you're still here. She looked back at him, at this man who had sat in the back of a car and listened to 8 minutes of her heart without intending to, who had corrected her assumption about herself with the same precision he applied to contract clauses, who had said please with his voice raw in a way she had replayed every day since, who had given her work to do in a crisis because he understood her well enough to know that was how she steadied herself. I told you, she said. I pay attention. He rose, came around to where she was sitting, extending his hand, the same formal gesture made intimate by everything it had accumulated since the first time he'd done it. I want to take you home, he said. Your actual home. And then I want to take you to dinner. A real one, without a crisis running underneath it. She put her hand in his. One condition, she said this time. He raised an eyebrow. You tell your sister about me before she calls on Sunday and finds out from someone else. He looked at her, and the smile of that careful, young, long-put-away thing came back. She already knows, he said. Zara blinked. What? She called 4 days ago. She said. He paused, and she watched him choose whether to say it She said that I sounded different. She asked what changed. Another pause. I told her your name. Zara stood up. She was very close to him now, close enough to see the detail of the tattoo she had called art to her best friend on an open line. Close enough that the space between them was no longer professional and had not been for some time. J1, she said. Yes. I'm glad the phone didn't hang up. He looked at her with those sharp, dark, honest eyes. So am I, he said. For the first time in a long time, so am I. He brought her home, and they went to dinner. And this time nothing ran underneath it, but the two of them exactly as they were, exactly as they had always been, finally without the distance between. And that is where we leave them tonight. If this story did something to you, if you felt it in your chest somewhere, I want to know. Drop a comment. Tell me the moment that got you. Tell me if you would have run or if you would have stayed. Tell me what you want to see next, because these two are not finished, not even close. If you are new here, welcome to Heartthread Tales. Hit that subscribe button right now. This is the channel where the stories are real and the feelings are real. Like this video so that more people can find this story. It takes 1 second and it means more than you know. We will see you in the next one.